All right, today we're starting a new unit. I'm going to have you watch this at home so you can practice the homework in class. So it's kind of backwards. That way, if you learn the lesson a little bit at home, I can help you better with homework in class because this could be a little confusing at first. So we're going to start in Unit 2. And one of the important vocabulary words is a unit rate. We'll add that to your notebook tomorrow, but a unit rate is a comparison in which one of the numbers being compared is 1 unit. So you need to have a 1 in a unit rate. I'm going to give you an example of how to use a ratio table to find a unit rate. So when you read example 1, it says, suppose it costs $120 for a group of 10 students. We have two different units. We have dollars and students. So it costs $120 for a group of 10 students to go on a field trip. And the question is, how much will it cost for one student? To answer this question, you need to find the unit rate. One way to do that is use the ratio tables that we've been working on and put dollars in the top and students in the bottom. And then put your starting value. So the starting value is, we know it costs $120 for 10 students. And then use the techniques we've been doing in class to work through your ratio table. But this time the goal is to have a comparison to one student. So we could divide both parts of the ratio table, the top and bottom, by 10. 10 divided by 10 is 1. 120 divided by 10 is 12. So what that tells us is it costs $12 per one student. That's the unit rate. So you can write that out in a sentence or a little, just sort of a brief sentence, or even a phrase. You could write just $12 for one student. Sometimes you might see $12 per, and use a little slash, one student. Oops, sorry about that. We don't usually put the 1 in, we just per, and then we write student, and that means the same thing. So one of the goals in Unit 2 is to understand what a unit rate is, so you'll be able to find the unit rate throughout the unit. Okay. The next thing is the first part of your book for Unit 2. It starts on page 43. And that's where it talks about unit rates. When you go to page 44, it does this interesting problem about equal shares. And they use like gummy worms. So I paraphrased it. And it has this picture here in your book. And the question that's being asked is, how can you share this 4-segment chewy fruit worm equally among 4 people? How many segments will each person get? So that's really easy at first. So you can see there's 4 segments. And since there's 4 people, it's nice and easy. Each person can get 1 segment. Luckily, the problems don't stay that easy, because that would be not very interesting. So let's answer that. Each person will get 1 segment. So that's a unit rate, because it has a 1 in there. So 1 segment per person. So in this problem, the hardest part about this unit is that worm had 4 segments. So it's asking how many segments will each person get. It doesn't ask you what fraction of the worm a person gets. If you go to the next problem, it says the same type of question. How can you share this 4-segment chewy fruit worm equally among 3 people? Well, now you have to think about probably how would you do that yourself. I bet most of you, there's only 3 people now, so most of you might like deal them out or split them up. Like if you had maybe Chloe and Finn and Mike. Only 3 people. They would each get 1 whole segment, but then you'd have to take this last segment and chop it into 4 pieces and then divide it up. So, for example, divide it into 3 pieces. I almost made a mistake because we have to give Chloe, Finn, and Mike equal parts of this last segment. So Chloe would get this piece. I don't know if that shows up very well. Let's try a different color. Chloe would get this piece. Finn would get that piece. And Mike would get this piece. So part of the homework is just showing in a picture what each person would get. So they would each get 1/3 plus their whole segment. So when you answer that question, you could show it with a picture like that. And then this picture would show you're dividing it into 3 equal parts. It has to be equal parts. And then you're giving Chloe her part, Finn his part, Mike his part. And so, to answer this question, each person will get 1 1/3 segments. So they each get 1 whole. This is the 1 whole, and then 1/3. This is the 1/3. 1 whole right here, and 1/3 right here. 1 whole brighter, and 1/3. So together, 1 whole and 1/3 for each person. We say that's 1 1/3 segments. So that's a unit rate, but it's a harder unit rate to see because you're saying each. When you say the word each, you mean each one person. We don't really write things like that in English, but because we're comparing segments to people, when there's 1 people, it's a unit rate. So another way to do that, to make that a little bit more clear, is to try a ratio table. So the picture is really nice. I think the picture shows really nice what each person gets. Unfortunately, we can't draw pictures of everything It's just too time consuming and the pictures sometimes are too complicated. But we could practice a ratio table, and I know ratio tables are still new, but we're going to practice ratio tables. So we're comparing segments to people. And we have 4 segments and 3 people. So if I want to figure out how much each one person gets, I need to divide this by 3 because I want to have 1 in the people row, which means I have to divide this by 3. And 4 divided by 3 you can write as a fraction. 4 divided by 3 is the same as 4/3, which is 1 1/3. We get the same answer with the ratio table. Let's try a practice problem. Okay, 5 people share equally a 3-segment gummy worm. So we're going to try a practice problem here. I'm going to, part A, same idea. Show how you would divide it so that each person gets the same amount. Well, I have to break this into 5 people's where they shared equally. So I bet a lot of you would, well, there's so many ways. Most 6th graders would probably divide each little piece into 5. It's a lot of work, but it's logical. So if there's 5 people, we'll give them different initials. We could do Sam and Charlie and Will and Abby and Anna. So if we did that over and over and over, we would do Sam and Charlie and Will and Abby and Anna. And one more time, Sam, Charlie, Will, Abby, and Anna. You can see that Sam, for example, gets 3 little squares. If you put those 3 little squares together, he would only get this much. He doesn't get a whole segment. He gets 3 parts of a 5, 3 parts out of the 5. So Sam would have these 3 parts. So he gets 3/5 of 1 segment. That's unit rate. So that's harder for people to talk about and to show in pictures. But you could, after you figured that out, show that picture and then kind of use initials. So that would be one way. There's 5 kids. There should be 15 little pieces. If you count, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 little pieces there, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pieces there, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 pieces there, and there's 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. So I've just divided it up where Sam gets all of this, Charlie gets this, Will gets these, Abby gets these, and Anna gets these. So that's how you can show it. What fraction of 1 segment does each person get? So they get 3 parts out of 5. So if you use a ratio table here, you can set it up the way we did the first one, where we have oops. Where we have segments again. And people. Remember, we started with 3 segments and 5 people. And we're trying to figure out what fraction of one segment does each one person get. So we need a 1 down here. So we're going to divide by 5. And another way to show division is with the fraction. Since 5 is bigger than 3, we could just say 3/5. That's the same thing as 3 divided by 5. So each person gets 3/5 of one segment. The last question is a little trickier. First, let's write a sentence for this answer. Each person will get 1 segment. The last part is asking what fraction of the whole worm. That's different. So instead of the fraction of a segment, now they're asking the fraction of a whole worm. So now we have 1 worm shared between 5 people. We want to figure out what fraction of the whole worm does 1 person get. So we have to divide 5 people by 5. So we want the bottom to be 1 person. 1 person. So that means we have to do the same thing to the top. Divide that by 5. Fraction bars mean divide. So each person gets 1/5 of the worm, the gummy worm. So when you look at your picture up here, 1/5 of the gummy worm, I've divided the gummy worm up into 5 parts. So each person gets 1/5 of the gummy worm, but that is 3/5 of a segment.